Yeah, it's UPBOptionMillionaires.com. It is Monday, March 28, 2016. You look at the long-term chart here for S&P 500 futures, and you can see we had the internet bubble, we had the financial crisis, and here we are. What is this one going to be called? We're putting in a series of lower highs here for the S&P 500. I think ultimately we're going to break down, at least hit the support that we saw that was formerly resistance for the internet and the financial crisis. And you could draw a trend line across, which would imply a move down to here. I think that's what's going to come in the months and years ahead. If you look, the crude oil futures chart also, to me, remains bearish. I know we've had a nice bounce here off the lows, but if you look, crude oil is breaking down. We have a similar bounce like we saw back a year ago, and that didn't work out so well, and I think this one isn't going to work out so well either. If you look at S&P 500 futures from a shorter time frame, I brought this up. Actually, we'll look at the VIX first. Last month, I said, hey, you know what? This 30 level is all, it's been a tough nut to crack. It's acted as a point of resistance that has ultimately led to a rally in the stock market. You see this 30 level, we got right up to it, and we've broken down over 50%, which has led to a really significant rally for S&P 500 futures. One that almost mirrors the one that we saw back at the end of September. And if you look, I've been drawing arrows on Twitter comparing this one. I think we're right about here. If you draw an arrow to the current action, you just take this move up. We are right about here. So we're setting up for some pretty nice downside over the next couple weeks here for the S&P 500, and that's just something to keep an eye on going forward. Again, also the VIX. If you look really since the lows that we saw back in August, we are right down to that level, and actually a little bit below the level. This is the lowest level that we've seen for the VIX since August, since before the crash. So something to keep an eye on here going forward. The new normal is about 13 or 14 here for the VIX, and I think we're poised for a move up back to 20. You can look the S&P 500 ETF, the spiders, stuck in a channel. The one thing I will note here off the lows of March 2009, you could say this is a monthly chart. Look at the mundane action. I mean, it's pretty methodical action to the upside. Once we hit our record highs, the market didn't really know what to do with itself. It's moving all over the place. We have these big wicks to the upside, the downside. But more importantly, and what I've been pointing out really the last couple videos I've done, is that these wicks to the downside and hitting the support line have happened with more frequency. And I think the next time we hit this line, we're going to break down. And again, it's going to send us to the lows that we saw that were former resistance back in the late 2007. You draw a trend line across. So we're in about this area here for the S&P 500 ETF, the spiders, 145, 150. So that's something to keep an eye on going forward. And again, yeah, this mundane quantitative easing, low interest rate policy action is now starting to really get a little bit out of control. So it's, again, something to keep an eye on. And we look, a chart that's been leading the way, XLE, Energy ETF, has come down to I said 50 this year. We came down to 49 and change. You can see this candle before we bounce, but we're heading up to the top side of this channel. This is going to be a great short here going forward. And I think we're going to break down under 50 to about 47.50, which implies about, pretty $14, $15 worth of downside here from current levels for the XLE. Some charts that have really been breaking out over the last 4 to 5 weeks. Look at Boeing breaking out, flying up, was down under 110 if you look from a shorter term perspective here. But again, these are stocks that start running out of steam. But look at the move off of 102. We're up $33 just in a short 3-4 week time frame. Also reporting earnings this week. Lululemon. I think this one's running out of gas. You can see a nice little bear flag here on the daily chart. And I think we're going to break down to about 45 there. Biotech. This is something that I was watching before the crash back last August. Biotech, certainly from a long-term perspective, putting in another stair step here, and I think ultimately it's going to head down to about 200 for IBB, which would be a pretty remarkable move from its formerly 400, near 400 level back in the middle of 2015. So we have these stair step patterns. Here's another stair step, folks, and we're going to head down to about $200 for IBB, which is also going to imply weakness for a lot of the other biotech stocks. One stock that might not be so weak over the short to medium term is VRX, which is already seeing a really significant move to the downside, broken all sorts of support levels. It's a 5-year weekly. You go all the way back 10 years to find some support going back to 2009, 2010. And I do think we're going to see at least a short-term bounce for VRX. So keep an eye on that one going forward. Netflix looks very bearish to me. I don't know, it's just me, but if you look from a 10-year monthly, we're putting in a nice little bear flag here. Significant move to the downside, reversed after we hit just under 80 on that market pullback that we saw earlier this year. But I think the move to the downside is going to take us to about $70. On Netflix, a couple of the charts to look at. I know the analysts are very bullish on Amazon. Similar type pattern here for a move to the downside. Google not so bearish here as it consolidates. And then we have Apple. Look at Apple's break. We may get a nice bounce for Apple here in the short term. Some positive analyst comments, but I do think we've seen the highs for 2016. I would not be surprised to see this break down into the low 80s and a long-term trendline support here back at the May 2013 lows. UPPOptionmillionaires.com. So keep an eye, short-term S&P 500 futures. We hit our highs overnight. We've been melting down a little bit. If you look, we're about 7-8 points off our highs. The overnight highs were starting to melt down. We got a brief little bounce there, consolidating after the move we saw late in the trading session on Thursday. I'll see you in the chat room at optionmillionaires.com. Take care.